Scions of the Southland, Mr. Grant. It seems, according to ESPN, that your local soccer team did lose to mine by a score of 3-1. Any thoughts?
We have a soccer team?
Yeah, we've been over this. Chicago Fire plays in Soldier Field. I spend like 3 or 4 years of being friends with you, trying to get you to watch the sport, and this is how you treat me on air?
Hey, I will say, back before Sinclair took the regional sports networks away, last year, when you guys came up to us, I watched a whole Chicago Fire game, and you weren't even there. And I feel like that's a step in the right direction, you know. And your scarf is right behind me. Podcasting is a visual medium, so you can definitely see it. But no, it's got the stars. I did buy an Atlanta United white and gold jersey. You've made some inroads there. It's just so I don't look like an idiot when I'm at games. But you know, I made the investment.
I don't think the jersey helps you look like an idiot anyway, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's better than me wearing a Cubs jersey or a Tech jersey to a soccer game. But how much better, your mileage may vary.
Yeah, the delta here is limited, as one might say.
Yep. Good old Delta. You know, they're a thing that exists too.
You're
let's
really bad. You're really messing up the segue.
Oh, I am. I
You're
should
really butchering this one.
All right.
All right.
Forget I said anything.
We are going to talk about the other type of football, the imperial, the American measuring system of football. Georgia Tech did play a spring game on Friday, April 23rd at 6 p.m., except it started at 6:30, and no one really told anyone that it was going to start at 6:30. And then it ended up going for like an hour and a half, though no one was really sure that it was going to go for an hour and a half. I don't know. It happened. It was weirdly formatted. There were like two teams based on the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks were determined where the points went. It was a whole thing. Did we learn anything? Did you learn anything from watching this?
I learned where my season tickets are going to be for next year, but that's about it.
Yeah, I don't like to say that this game was a whole nothing burger, but it was kind of.
It was at least fruitful for the Georgia Tech Athletic Association because they got like $18 out of me from beer and hot dogs. So, you know, they made some money. That's nice, right?
Yeah, making money off of fans. That is nice. I will give you that. But it's hard to take away from what is ostensibly and also very much so billed as a scrimmage. It's hard to take away anything. And especially in the format that they did it in, it's even harder to take away anything.
You mean you didn't get a bunch out of them doing jumping jacks for like 5 minutes?
I also didn't get a bunch out of them not tackling or like having weird rules about what counts as a thud and what doesn't. And it was weird. I have thoughts. Some of them are just a little extreme about the way that this was formatted.
I could take a left turn here and go into it blows my mind that there were like 10 times more people there than there will ever be at a softball, tennis, whatever match. But I mean, that's a completely different take. I just don't, if somebody out there in podcast land knows what the true point of the spring game is, I would love to know because it didn't feel, frankly, all that different from the open practice you and I went to, what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
I mean, it was basically the same thing, except there was a more well-defined team scrimmage session, which, again, well-defined is doing not exactly accurate, but it was defined, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like it was 3 quarters, but then there was like magically 2 minutes left. I mean, we're trying to apply logic and rules to something that doesn't seem to have a lot of logic or rules. So perhaps it would be best to just say, That's life. I don't know, right? So
Okay, Frank Sinatra. Let's cool it with the let's cool with the lyrics here.
my kind of town. I don't know. We should do. I was very seriously tempted to pitch the idea of doing podcasting in weird places edition over the summer of just like I don't know. We go to Piedmont, or I do it from some place when I'm at home in Chicago, or just to say that we podcasted from a weird place. But that's neither here nor there. Um, Point is, you saw the TV side of this game. You didn't get a lot out of it. I saw it from the in person side. I'm not convinced there was much to do, but I will say positives. I went in wanting to see one player in particular who's been at the top of my mind since he transferred in, and that was McGowan, number 8. I'd
Number
say
two, actually,
two.
but
Okay.
yes.
Anyway, it's been a long couple days. But anyway, you know what I mean. And I thought it was good to see him out there. Jeff Sims had some good throws, and I think my surprise was that Peary kid kind of has a cannon on
He
his.
can spin it. He
Mm-hmm.
can really spin it. The targeting laser in that arm needs a little work, but it's a real missile.
Yeah, I mean, if he and Yates and Sims and I mean that's the bones of a pretty solid QB room. I mean, obviously you're very high on Yates for sentimental Milton reasons, which
Alma
kind of
mater, baby.
on him. But no, between the surprise of liking what I saw out of Peary, Jeff Sims looked like Jeff Sims. There's not a lot to it. Bruce Jordan Swilling had a solid day. I believe he caught a long pass too, and he's a running back ostensibly. Um,
Now he is a running back.
Now he's kind of been the big question mark for the last like what 4 years now. But
Positional
uh,
flexibility.
and the other thing that I really enjoyed seeing was bringing Passner and Fortner into the game, because I can't say that on my bingo card, if you'd sat me down a year ago, right, as you know, we were starting to believe that sports would happen again in the fall, and you told me that the two teams that would bring me the most consistent amounts of joy in the next season would be men's and women's basketball, and not baseball, and not volleyball, golf, women's tennis. I would have been like, are we talking about the same basketball teams? Anyways, it's great to see Nell and Josh out there. Even they didn't do a ton. It's obviously a guest coach position, but I don't know.
Hey,
When you feel
Passner
the warm
spiked
fuzzies.
the hell out of a ball. All right, he gets props for that.
And the Tecmo Bowl play sheet, that was fun.
There were again parts of it were fun, and no, like I don't think we learned anything, but parts of it were fun. I think that's the way that we brand this.
And we got to go hang out at the old ball yard for a little bit, or do some uh, unscheduled change of enjoyment. That's a really weird way to put that,
You
but
had to put that as corporate as possible, and you're not even in corporate America yet. I'm kind of offended.
that's Georgia Tech just teaches me how to create the next. What can I say?
God, company man until the end. All right, we're moving on to the track. It was a Georgia Tech Invitational, either this week or last week, because RamblinRec.com did not give me a date on this. It was the last. Well, we didn't podcast last week, so we get to cover it now.
Yep.
See, got you there. It was the last home meet of the outdoor season. What happened? Who was there? Give me the short version here.
Yeah, I mean it's the same. I feel bad saying it's the same four as usual, but our usual suspects were back out. Obviously, everyone was competing, but Nicole Fegans still in the top 5 in the women's 5K. Andrew Kent top 30 in the men's 5K. Those two have been tearing it up in the distance events all year. Bria Mathews, we've talked at a decent amount of length about her and how she's really gutted out. Really quite an excellent and lengthy tenure at Georgia Tech.
Lots of degrees.
Lots of
Lots of
degrees,
degrees.
lots of math, lots of electrical engineering, very computer engineering, all that stuff. Very, it's athletes like that make you go, wow, that's special to be at Georgia Tech and accomplishing stuff like that. And then also rounding out our big four of top 30 event qualifier types is Olivia Moore, women's pole vault. I believe on the weekend, or no, I think her current best is a 4.17 meters, which is pretty darn good. But no, the four of them, as always, quite close to the top of the list in their respective events. We've had some freshmen in the track events, or sorry, the field events for the ladies looking pretty good as well. And then, yeah, I don't know. I believe the last I checked, because the United States Track and Field Cross Country Coaches Association puts out kind of
What a
like
mouthful of a name.
dude,
That's
it
besides
is.
the point.
There's
But
three C's in a row. It's crazy.
USTFCCA.
No, you forgot a C in there because it's Coaches Association. So there's three C's in a row.
Okay, please continue.
Anyways, they do something similar to what we do with the cap and swimming. So it's like track and field, weighted metric based off top finishes, etc.
As one does, yes.
Yeah, and I believe the women cracked into the top 40 in the last update. So good job, ladies.
Yeah. Following up on that, RamblingWreck.com did note that our usual four suspects here ranked in the top 30 of their respective events. So that's Fegans at number 4 in the women's 5K in D1. Bree Mathews at 11 in the women's long jump. Olivia Moore at 23 in the women's pole vault. And Andrew Kent at 28 in the men's 5K. I would read those times and distances, but I feel like I am not qualified, and I also don't think that those make sense without context.
Yeah, context is hard. They went fast and or far. We'll see what they have to do. I think they're in Athens next week. So if you're listening to this in Athens, one, we're sorry that you have to live in Athens, and two, go check them out because they'll be up your way.
Speaking of other things that were up in North Georgia and far away from Atlanta, women's tennis was at the ACC tournament at Berry College in Rome, Georgia. They had a nice little run, nice tidy little run to the title game, or title match, title game, question mark? Nomenclature is hard. By beating Virginia Tech and Miami, but ran into a little trouble versus the University of North Carolina. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So it's a class. It's not like the men's and women's basketball tournament. It's a classically seeded out tournament. I believe they got it was the 5 seed, I think, if they're playing NC State, who's the 4 seed in the second round. But anyways, handled Virginia Tech basically as expectations. They were very competitive with NC State earlier in the year, so that being a 4-2 win showed a nice little bit of progress. Yeah, as solid as they come. Miami, a little close. I know you might have some thoughts about that. You were also watching the scores, as was I.
Too close.
And Georgia Tech did go up. We went up 3-0. They really tried to make it a blowout, but that's the thing about tennis is just the nature of once you're past 1-0 either way, those next 4 or 5-ish points kind of all happen at once. Is that a fair way to put that, you think?
I mean, yeah, that's kind of how time and sets work. But yes.
Yeah, but so the in between of that second, third point for Tech, immediately followed by 3 Miami wins, is a lot of whiplash. But 2 games in a row, or 2 matches in a row, Mahak Jain down on, I think it was court 6, maybe it was court 5, clinching the match to send them to face UNC. UNC is the best team in the country. They play the number 31 player in the country on court 6, which is an astounding level of depth.
Not great.
We won 1 point, so that's something, right?
I mean, we won a point, a single match. And honestly, at a certain level, I feel like that is a spiritual win.
We applied scoreboard pressure.
It was a quality loss.
I mean, in the SEC, that gets you into the playoffs. So, If there was the standard that applied to everyone, we could actually make it. But no, they should be playing in the tournament. I think that's in 2 weeks. Is when the team tournament starts. We don't know the draw for that yet, but they're a top 20 team for sure. And that was before they went 3-1 this week against some pretty solid opponents. So yeah, no real shame in losing to UNC. It would have been nice to pick them off and get the crown, but maybe they're saving that win for the tournament, right?
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm hoping. Let's switch gears to the men who are also at the ACC tournament. I do not have the location of this one handy, but it was in Georgia, if I remember correctly. They advanced to the quarterfinals versus UVA by also beating Miami, but they did fall to UVA in that match 4-3. UVA went on to the championship match. Don't exactly remember what happened in that. That was earlier today. What can we take away from this men's performance?
They very well could have knocked off a top 10 UVA team. It was 3-3. Andres Martin led on court 2, which was the last court in play, 5-3. So basically, you just need to hold serve once and you win. But that went to a third set tiebreak, and he lost, which is tough. But again, this is a really young team. A lot of these players have never really been in a position like this before, I think is fair to say. And a win over UVA would have absolutely played them off the bubble and into the tournament, in my opinion. I believe they're 13-9, making that a, say, 14-9, but that extra win being UVA and then, losing to the next team on the schedule would have been quite a bit of a nice bump. But they do, it is worth noting, they do currently sit 31st in the country. You have to assume that some of the 32 conference automatic qualifiers will be in front of them, namely the ACC champion, Wake, UNC, UVA, one of those 3 won. The Wake UNC match, actually, that was some weird stuff yesterday.
Are we going to switch gears to that for a half second? Because I remember reading through the recap of that, and that is oh boy.
Do you want to do like quick 1, 2, 3 on that? Because that probably should have been a Demon Deacons win. But
all right, so this is from Deacon Sports on Twitter, who put together this small little recap. So in this match, Wake won, lost doubles on a 8-6 tiebreaker, had its second best player and most experienced player disqualified for a, quote, illegal bathroom break between sets. 3, lost on court 1 in a third set tiebreaker 8-6. And 4, lost on court 4 in a third set tiebreaker 10-8.
You win any of those, and the match goes the other way. In fact, that's probably all 4 of UNC's points right there too, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's the doubles. That's, well, I guess the second point, the disqualification doesn't count and towards the score, but that's a doubles point and 2 singles points. That's 3 points at least. So,
oof.
Ugh. And then
what a way to lose,
Certainly a way to lose. Not a preferred method of taking a loss, I will say.
Yeah, not. We don't endorse that here at Scions of the Southland podcast. So, if in case you guys were wondering, not our speed, but yeah, no. It kind of to recap on the whole, great weekend for the women. Pretty good weekend for the men. Probably would have called it great as well if they would have gotten that 4th point against UVA. But getting. Sorry, I'm coughing. I don't know where that came from. But no, the women are firmly in the driver's seat for a bid to the old NCAA tournament. The men are on the bubble. Hopefully, not a lot of bid stealing, but should be looking up for them too. So we kind of wait and see on those in terms of when they might play next.
Cool. Speaking of another program on the NCAA tournament bubble, men's golf had a very interesting, winding weekend at the ACC championships. They ended up finishing fifth, which is not great. It's not necessarily the usual standard that we set for this program, but and obviously it's been a weird year. But the reason it's not great is because the top four spots go to match play. They missed out on the fourth place by a single stroke. Let's
Well,
talk.
there's at least a little bit, I think, of necessary asterisking here. The fact that they were only down a stroke at the end of this in fifth is quite remarkable, considering they started this today 7 strokes down. So it wasn't for lack of oomph or effort, but it is unfortunate they did wind up moving into a tie with FSU and Wake for a little bit. But those two teams were the ones that went on to the playoff for the fourth spot in match play. And you're right. It's not the usual standard, especially like this team is the 3-time back-to-back current whatever ACC title winner. But you got to put this in perspective. How much did they lose compared to last year's team, which tragically did not get to compete for an NCAA and ACC title because they certainly would have been in the mix? Off that team, let alone 2019, 18, 17, you lose not one, but the last 2 in a row amateur players of the year for the whole freaking country in Andy Ogletree and Tyler Strafacci.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a shame to lose the Schneiderjans as well. And that whole starting 5 was a great roster. But the fact that they're a top 30 team, they're on the bubble with largely old role players and incoming new freshman types carrying the brunt of that load. They're the 30th ranked team in the country right now, and that's a nice step up from where they started this spring slate as well. So
mm-hmm.
they're very similar to the men's team, the men's tennis team. Sorry, in that top 30 bubble team. Could they do it? Could they not? I don't think it stinks to come down from the high of this team has the expectation to win a title to where they're at now, but that they could have fallen farther, right? We've seen our sports do that coming off a great year.
Yeah, don't totally look up the year that I started at Tech and that football season.
I was going to say, don't call it a rebuild. They reloaded pretty well for a team that, again, when in 7, 10, whatever years, we'll talk more about the Hall of Fame in a little bit. But I guarantee you, both Strafacci and Ogletree will be in the Georgia Tech Sports Hall of Fame. And you cannot lose 2 Hall of Famers and apply the same logical standard to it, right?
I mean, see, you say that you can't, but remember lizard brain here. Lizard brain says you must. We are going to switch gears over to volleyball, which I guess we're a couple weeks overdue on this. They played on the 14th. They played on the 14th and the 15th, so 10 days.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't podcast last week. We were, I mean, I was drowning, but we're back. We can talk about it.
Let's talk. They beat Lipscomb in a very tight. What was that? A 4-set victory.
Yeah, 3-1.
And then they got swept by Minnesota, but it was a lot closer than I think the final score in those games in those sets indicated. It was for a team that was basically confirmed as the last team in the tournament. It was honestly very good performance. I think it's disappointing that they didn't push Minnesota a little bit more and take one of those sets, especially as they were just making a couple of errors here and there on serves, and it was just a very strange match now that I'm thinking about it in my head again in certain spots. But they were pushing Minnesota pretty good for most of that match. They just couldn't get one set in, and I think that bit is disappointing. But the overall performance is pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree. The the general kind of vibe I had was kind of like being at peace with it. I'm definitely glad we made it there. That team deserved to be in it the year before, and they had the record for it, even if they never really got the wins. But I don't know, like it's tough because I don't want to be like, yeah, it's okay, like whatever. But it was a good team. They proved that they were definitely a deserving top 50, etc. Team in the country, and we got two more matches out of them. Again with the Minnesota, like we I think that was the most interesting part of this year, and it's something I've noticed covering volleyball now for 4 years is that yes, Pitt is a thing that exists, but like I can't remember the last time we played a team with the pedigree of Minnesota.
I mean, the Big
Outside of
Ten, when it comes to volleyball, like
yeah,
the Big
but
Ten is the country's premier volleyball conference. Like, let's more. You can say that
oh,
with reasonable certainty.
between Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin,
Yeah,
Penn State, all those programs are wonderful. But like it, I think it really made me have a little bit of perspective for the Minnesota of just I think more so in volleyball than a lot of sports. Like if you look at what tennis does, right? The women's tennis is going out in a normal year playing Texas Tech and Northwestern and Pepperdine and just randomly doing stuff like that. And I don't know. I guess I feel like volleyball outside of the Georgia and whatever SEC team come for that tournament every year, and then maybe one or two teams in other away tournaments. I feel like we just don't see a lot of the rest of the country's teams. Am I going down a rabbit hole too far
no,
here, or
no,
is this
no,
just
no.
me being?
I think I see what you're saying, and I think we've commented on this before in terms of non-conference scheduling, right? Because we already always start the season with Alabama A&M or another smaller school that's relatively local, that's like within a 2-hour drive away, and that saves on costs for everyone involved, but it's not necessarily the highest level of competition. And would it be cool to have but on the other hand, would it be cool to have Kentucky or like I don't know, like a Florida or like one of the bigger name volleyball schools that come into our place, or us go there and put those on the old resume, even if we lose? It would be cool, but at the same time, I think there's a value in saying let's schedule effectively, right? Because the easiest path to getting in the tournament for an ACC team is to get the auto bid, and the conference itself, as we've kind of proven over the last couple of years, that top spot of Pitt's a little shaky.
Yep.
Pitt is a great team, and they made like the national quarterfinals or whatever this year. I'm not gonna denigrate that, but at the same time, it's still shaky. You can beat Pitt. Pitt is not. Pitt is not the unbeatable juggernaut. It's not a super weapon here,
Yeah.
and it hasn't been for a couple of years. So if you schedule effectively non-conference, you don't limit, and you say we're going to win our games, win the easy stuff out of conference, and pad the wins, and then play hardball in conference and make it so that we cruise into the tournament that way. I think you're fine. I think that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I want them to keep the UGA of the world, on the schedule, and I do like the local flair, but I don't know. It feels a little bit different, and I'm glad we got to see Minnesota. I would like just a little bit more, though, right? Is that a fair thing to ask, or maybe it's because we're not getting invited, and an appearance like this will help us get invited to a bigger tournament,
Potentially. I think it's also in the Southeast. I mean, one this year it's COVID restrictions, right?
Oh yeah,
For
for
the
sure.
Yeah, but next year, you say next year or the year after that, working some of those in might be potentially like you're starting to, grow as a program. But at the same time, it's also you need to be invited, right? Like you said,
Yep.
maybe some of these other programs are saying, I don't want to invite Georgia Tech because that lowers my strength of schedule.
Yeah.
Because the ACC is not necessarily a volleyball conference, number one. And also the Southeast in general is not the Southeast, like where we are in relation to other parts of the country are not premier volleyball hotbeds.
Yeah.
So it's a give and take kind of deal. I think your guess, your projection that getting in some of these games and pushing a team like Minnesota, like we did, gets us in the conversation in some of these scheduling rooms. I think that has some merit, and maybe that bears some fruit in the next couple of years, but it's still a give and take process, I think.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. I think last note on volleyball via ramblinrec.com, Mariana Brambilla and I think it's Brambilla. I've probably been saying that wrong for 3 years now. And Julia Bergman have been named AVCA All-Americans. Mariana Brambilla on the third team and Julia Bergman as an honorable mention. Let's move on to the ball and bat sports, which have had very consistently mixed results probably since the season started, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, where do we
I'm
want to start? Because I think
softball guys they come. So
where do we want to
been
start?
A little.
Because
I think we should start in Troy, Alabama.
Let's start in Troy, Alabama. Softball traveled to Troy, Alabama. They split a doubleheader, they split a doubleheader versus Troy. Then they came home and split a doubleheader versus Kennesaw State. This all followed a weekend in which they got swept, including a Peace Day Resistance no-hitter in the final game by Virginia Tech. There are only 4 games left on the softball slate. By my count, they are 15-25. I think both of us can safely say this is not the season that we expected.
Before we dive a little bit more into this, we went 1 for 3 against Virginia Tech. They won the first game of the series and then lost the next 3. But
Close enough.
I'm very reticent for the reasons stated and unstated to dive too deep into me being a crotchety bum about
no, the crotchety
the
bum
state
is
of
for the other bat and ball sport.
True. But I just like it. We've always needed more pitching, and we've kind of hit our way out of it for a long time. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem like we can just hit our way out of losses like even a 500-ish Georgia Tech team would do the past 2 or 3 years. So, I mean, the problem there is slightly recruiting, but you're now suddenly forced to reckon with the fact that, and this is somewhat true in volleyball, but it's more true in softball, the fact that the ACC is rapidly becoming a real softball conference.
Yep. I mean,
and
you're
it's
seeing
passing
that with and you're seeing you're seeing Duke and Clemson put together not just serviceable softball programs, not just competitive softball programs, but good softball programs in 2-3 years of existence. And though they're already ranked, you're seeing Florida State still settle at the top of the conference. You're seeing Virginia Tech ranked. You have a lot of nearby competition that you are supposed to be using as benchmark that, like you said, has kind of passed you by this season.
Yeah. And you're always going to have to deal with Florida State. Virginia Tech, very legitimate. Duke, Clemson, very legitimate. Louisville, solid program. There was a time when Georgia Tech and Florida State dominated this conference. And that's just not true anymore. And you have to recruit your way out of it. You have to coach your way out of it. And you have to win the games in the margins. And I don't think there have been a lot of games that we can say this year that we stole wins or dominated. It's been a very feast or famine year. I think is the way to put it.
Hot and cold, like Katy Perry said.
Keep in mind, this team was 5-0 and receiving votes in the major polls after 1 week.
Yeah, that was a fun weekend.
Honestly, it was. We looked really good. And so
Yeah.
that's what the team can do if things break the right
It
way,
can go
you know?
full Bash Brothers. It can go full Bash Brothers. It's the pitching has been consistently. I think the pitching has been consistently letting the hitting down. But there is also the problem of when you get into situations like a VT pitcher throwing a no hitter in the last game of the weekend when you had a good chance to split the series based on the performances. I know that I said they got swept, but like they could have split that series.
Yeah, they could have.
It's not. It's the possibility of that isn't zero. It could have happened. It just they got no hit in the final game instead. So it sucks. Like I think it sucks for both of us because we really do like the softball program to sort of criticize it and point out its flaws does hurt us at a certain level, but it's the same problems we've been talking about all season, and it's the same problems that we talked about heading into the season, and it doesn't like I haven't checked the recruiting classes. I don't know if it's going to get better. It's just these are issues that need to be ironed out. Whether you chalk them up to COVID this year or not, they need to be ironed out.
Yeah, it brings me no joy to find no joy in this, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I agree. Speaking of no joy, the other bat and ball sport, they baseball beat the return leg versus Georgia State, so that was nice to see. Or beat Georgia State on the return leg. English is hard, and then they went 1-2 versus Florida State this weekend. Florida State is a top 25 team and had basically the same record as we do. It was a challenging first game, I would say. The second game was a little closer. You did have the weather delay. That one ended. You had the weather delay, and then that one had to be restarted this morning. We're recording this on Sunday. And that one ended up being a barn burner, ended 13-10. And then they won the third game. That was right after that. So ended on a decent streak, I guess you could say, with the run generation. But I don't know. This team has just given me very in the woods vibes this year.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you say?
yeah, I think that's fair. The I I I keep trying to like logic my way out of or logic my way into why they're, not having the season that I think most people expected. And I don't really have any good answers at this point. Like the pitching's inconsistent, the batting's inconsistent. They're I don't know. It's not a very consistent team on either side of the ball, and let alone in the field. So there's really not a lot more that you can expect to get in, I think, that kind of scenario.
And it's not like they didn't get I mean, we talked about this last time. It's not like they didn't get the practice in because of construction or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had full practice time. They knew the COVID protocols. COVID protocols haven't made us miss a game this baseball season, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they've done a good that.
Yeah, on either side. Like, I mean, I think the ACC and other places in the ACC have had a couple of issues, but baseball-wise, it's been pretty clean for us, both in and outside of the program in terms of our opponents. But there are 14 games left on the schedule. I only counted. I didn't look at the actual opponents. They are what? The last time we checked RPI, they were like 70th and probably pretty outside the tournament field if it's still at 64 this year.
Yep.
They got some work to do. And this was probably the weekend to start doing that work, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, they've clawed their way back. I think they're at like 44 right now, but
promising, but
we've
still
seen
work to do.
Flashes of a bullpen that's a little bit better too, I think, of late, but there's just not a lot you can do when there's not a lot that you've done. If that sounds like a weird logic.
Sounds like a cliche, but I think I get what you're saying. It's like the proof is in the pudding, and there's not much pudding to have proof in.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it. I would agree with that statement.
There's no empirical data to support a conclusion yet, and it is unclear whether they will generate said empirical data.
Yep, I agree. But
God, I had to put it as engineering way as possible to get through to you.
someday I'll be free of this.
Someday. Last note on baseball: Danny Hall won his 1300th game all time. I think that was in his career, not necessarily at Georgia Tech. So congrats to him. On the post-game Zoom call, all the players harassed him or jumped in his call and harassed him, which was pretty funny. Got to say that is the social media hijinks are sometimes a highlight of this team, including the bullpen song, or when the opposing team goes to the bullpen. It's
I
pretty nice.
I think that this team, when they fire on all cylinders, has the wonderful benefit of being, when they're good, you get to see them be good for 60 games. You know, like it is, and I think that's what makes it, like this team is above 500. They're not bad. They're not a bad team. They're incredibly talented. It's just one of those like, man, we know what the problems are, and we keep having to see the same ones crop up. But
Yeah. It's like the 2010 Philly Eagles dream team, uh, where like everyone said that they were going to be really good, and then they were kind of frustrating and disappointing. You know the exact team I'm talking about, the Vince Young team.
yep. Oh yeah, Vince Young, the goat, truly the
Ah,
goat.
yes, truly, horns down, indeed. It's just this is not a season that we expected. It could have gone a lot better. It still has the opportunity to go a lot better. Still 14 games left before you get to the ACC tournament and before you get to the NCAA tournament, but work to do.
Yeah,
Work to do. Okay. Let's finish up by talking about the Georgia Tech Hall of Fame. All these names are via ramblinrec.com. So we allowed, I think, elected is probably the right word, elected 8 athletes, former athletes, to the Georgia Tech Hall of Fame class of 2021. National Tennis Player of the Year, Irina Falcone. A softball All-American, Jen Yee. 3-time triple jump All-American, Alfonso Jordan. Football kicker, Travis Bell. Baseball shortstop, Derek Dietrich. Basketball forward, James Forrest, I think. Oh, and then 2-time All-ACC defensive tackle, Vance Walker. And longtime women's basketball head coach, Agnes Baranato. A lot of these names, as I'm not a historian, I don't necessarily recognize. I do recognize Agnes Baranato. I do believe she's coaching at Kennesaw State, I think, to this day. So that's great for her. Great to get that recognition. Derek Dietrich is with the Yankees, which is a very unfun place for him to be. But again, congrats on the whole Georgia Tech Hall of Fame bit.
get the bag, sir. Whether it's with
Secure the bag and beardless while you're at it, apparently.
Yep.
And Jen Yee, Canadian national team star in softball, and all-around very good softball player.
Okay, you want to know my take on this? I have one active take. I cannot believe that Falcone and Yee weren't in the Hall of Fame already.
Yeah, I don't understand how this works, right? Because I guess they graduated in 10 or 11, maybe.
Yeah.
And so it's a 10-year cycle, and when you can be named to the Hall of Fame, or at least it's like your entry year plus 4 years. That's like the assumed degree path, and then that assumed end year plus 10 years, if that makes sense. Because they let Megatron in 2 years ago, and there's no way he was 10 years after. He didn't even graduate.
Yeah, I don't think he's got his degree yet, does he?
Does not have his degree yet. Also, his degree program no longer exists.
Rip.
Building construction, Bachelor's of Science no longer exists as a program.
I thought I heard some rumors that they were talking about bringing it back, but I got no clue.
If they brought it back, it would only be for one student, and then it would disappear back into the ether.
Imagine being like the one random 18-year-old freshman that signs up for building construction, thinking it'd be interesting, and it's just a ploy for Calvin Johnson to graduate. So it's just you and Calvin in every class. That would be a great sitcom, I think.
Now I need this in my life. It would be a very good pairing on Apple TV with Ted Lasso.
The little Joey, the scared little freshman from Johns Creek, having to hoof it in the big city with his best pal and partner in every lab class, Calvin Johnson.
So it has like big buddy cop comedy vibes.
Oh yeah. They're throwing passes to each other on the row stamps field, you know.
But Joey can't. But Joey's not an athlete, so it just hits him in the face every time, Scott Sterling style.
And then they just like stand up and sigh and laugh like it's the cut scene of a bad movie. You know the one.
Yes, yes. It's Lethal Weapon, but with sports and students.
Yeah.
We
So
could do this. This is totally relevant to the episode. I'm keeping it in.
if anybody has Megatron's number, please tell him we have a great business venture for him to get involved in.
I'm sure he would love to invest in our hypothetical TV show.
Well, they took away his pretzel shop at the student center, so he's got to have something to do.
That's fair. That's fair. Finishing up, because we're still talking about the Hall of Fame and not about any of the all people that were actually named to the Hall of Fame this cycle. Congrats to all of them.
Yeah, and with that, we can let them go on their merry way, I guess.
Yeah, it's time to vamoose. It's 10:45 p.m. on the East Coast. I think both of us have other things to do before midnight strikes.
Yeah, we do.
Indeed. Listeners, we will see you all next week. Thank you for listening.